A lot of discourse, a lot of discourse, a lot of discourse, a lot of people sharing the opinion, once again, that BookTok is killing literature, that BookTok is ruining the publishing industry. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I am going to try not to get into them today. I actually am going to share with you some authors and some books that I found thanks to BookTok. I wanted to create this video. I was actually inspired by a comment that I received on my previous YouTube video. This comment from this lovely follower who praised me for talking about books that aren't BookTok books. I do understand where this commenter is coming from. There is this broad perception of what kinds of books are shared and spoken about within the BookTok space. I understand that this belief exists largely for people who are not in BookTok or for people who have not cracked the surface of the For You page of BookTok. So I understand why the phrase, the concept BookTok books exists and why someone would come to me and say, I love that you don't talk about BookTok books. But I do resent the notion. I, first of all, resent the notion that the predominantly young women who like to read romance and fantasy novels and then like to speak about those with a community of romance and fantasy readers on social media are vapid, unintelligent, shallow people who don't know what real literature is and are somehow ruining a multi-billion-dollar industry. Let's just state the obvious that that whole idea is deeply rooted in misogyny. But I also resent the idea that BookTok is one thing, that the titles that come to mind when somebody mentions BookTok books are the only things that are spoken about in these spaces. BookTok encompasses a diverse multitude of readers who read all sorts of genres, who are speaking about all kinds of books. Again, I think it just comes down to this misogynistic idea that if it's something that young women are speaking about on social media, then it must be frivolous and anti-intellectual. I said I wouldn't get into this. So going back to this comment that I received, praising me for talking about books that aren't BookTok books, to that I say, they are. By the very nature of my talking about them, they are BookTok books. I know what you meant, but let's deconstruct, let's debunk, let's throw away with this idea of what BookTok is, of what a BookTok book is. I am here today in this video to tell you about some of the amazing authors, some of the amazing books that I have found and read purely because of BookTok. Starting off with one of my absolute favorite authors who, fun fact, once in an interview, I think following the release of Penance, yes, we're talking about Eliza Clark, said that she never wants to write a book of the same genre more than once, which I find very interesting, very devastating, and I'm very curious as to how that's going to work for her. Is she just going to go through all the genres and then say, well, that's me done? I don't know. But so far, she is holding up. I first discovered Eliza Clark when everybody on BookTok, yes, indeed, were talking about boy parts. This is a dark and depraved story about a young woman who is an artist, a photographer to be exact, who likes to photograph men in quite compromising positions, shall we say. She's really not a good person. She's very much a narcissist. She's a terrible friend. And she gets a spot at a gallery, and so she has to pull together a body of work for this art show, and she gets a little carried away. She's also written Penance. This was her most recent release, her second release. It came out last year. And this one it's kind of structured as a true crime novel written by a male journalist. Essentially, it's like this book that had been pulled from shelves because it was a little bit questionable how this journalist got his information. Very good times, very good writing. Not romance, not fantasy, but I found them on BookTok and they're very big on BookTok, and we are all very excited to read She Is Always Hungry. While we are talking about authors and their entire bodies of work, I have to mention Mona Awad. Now, Bunny, hello. I mean, you cannot tell me that you don't know that this is a BookTok book. What I bet you probably think, though, is that it's probably not that good. It's probably not that well written. Check yourselves. I read this book and it is so dark and funny, again, like Eliza Clark, really, but the dark humor, it is so clever. I just adored Mona's writing. And so I had to delve into all of her other works. And I can't remember in what order I read them, but what I will say is that my favorite Mona Awad novel has become All's Well. This follows a ex-theatre actress turned theatre teacher who is hell-bent on putting on a production of All's Well that ends well, even though her students are like, can we please not? She's like, you will appreciate the works of William Shakespeare. She is suffering from some kind of chronic illness, chronic pain situation. People, as they do when it comes to chronic illness and chronic pain, don't really believe her and think she's just kind of nuts. And so then she really goes nuts. And it is a wonderful commentary on chronic illness and chronic pain, but it is also very funny. And the one thing that I always say about Mona Awad when I talk about her work, whether I like them or not, is that nobody writes a woman losing her mind like Mona Awad does. I think that she understands the female psyche so deeply and can twist it into this really entertaining, darkly funny narrative, and it's just such a joy to watch her protagonists spiral. Again, this is literary fiction. This is dark humor and depraved women losing their minds, women suffering from physical ailments and mental health issues, and it's really smart commentary on those things, you know, and it's a lot to unpack and dissect should you wish to do so, if that's how you enjoy reading. But it's also just like a joy to consume at a surface level if that's how you enjoy reading, which a lot of people do, which is valid. That's how I enjoy reading. I like to just enjoy a story. Do you sit down to watch a movie every time you sit down to watch a movie and then like unpack all the tropes and metaphors and whatever the fuck? Like, come on. Anyway. Next is a book that I am quite regularly recommending, and that is The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. Now, it's not necessarily this book that I saw people talking about on BookTok, although some do. It's actually her other novel, her newer novel, Cursed Bread, that I saw so many of the people that I follow talking about and raving about. And so Sophie McIntosh's name got planted into my brain, and one day when I was at a secondhand bookstore just browsing the shelves, I saw The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh, and I went, I know that name. I know that author. I've seen her somewhere. Indeed, it was on BookTok. So I bought The Water Cure thinking, well, you know, if people like Cursed Bread, then maybe this is good as well, and I haven't found Cursed Bread yet, so I'll pick this up. Oh my God, this was one of those books where, have you ever just like started reading a book and it's like by page 3, you're like, holy shit, yeah, this is a bit of me. I am going to love this. Like just immediately you know that this is a book for you. This was one of those. And I was just like sucked in and I was like, yes, this writing is insane. This story, where is it going? I need to know. It follows a family who have moved out to an island with their 3 daughters because the world, it's sort of dystopian. The world has become a place where men are kind of making women sick. And the cure, if you do get made sick by a man, is something they're calling the water cure. And so every day the girls have to practice this practice so that should they come into contact with men, they know how to handle the situation. And then one day, dad, or maybe both of the parents, go missing. And then these two men show up on the island and the girls are like, fuck. And it's really good. And I love a like quiet little dystopian, but that isn't like a sci-fi genre or anything. And speaking of dystopian literary fiction. I mean, this book just really takes the cake, I think. And the fact that it was published in like the 90s and it is now all over BookTok, I think says enough. The fact that it can be read as a contemporary novel still at this point, the fact that readers of all kinds of books are adoring it, and it is a little like left of field in terms of like any kind of genre fiction, any kind of typical modern story. I'm talking about I Who Have Never Known Men. You may, again, see, this is the thing, right? Talking about these books, I feel like every single time I want to disclaimer it with like, you've probably heard of this because everyone on BookTok is talking about it. But if that were the case, if everyone knew that everyone on BookTok was talking about these books, then we wouldn't have this entire misconception of what a BookTok book is, right? So I have to kind of check myself and remind myself that I exist in a certain community on BookTok that not everyone else does, and certainly people outside of BookTok altogether have a conception of what BookTok is, and so they're not witnessing my everyone talking about these books. Hello, I hope I am speaking to people who exist outside of the community that I am a part of, because that is the point of this video, to reach you and let you know that, hey, we talk about these literary fiction books as well, and they're really good. So everyone I see is talking about I Who Have Never Known Men, and has been for the last like 2 years. I'm not even going to lie. I read it last year and it was my favorite read of last year. It is, like I said, a dystopian translated from French. I think the author is Belgian, and it's essentially about, it follows these 40-odd women who have been trapped, locked in a bunker underground for they don't even know how many years. Like, they've just lost all sense of time at this point. They have no idea. All they know is like they have aged a lot, and there's this really young girl who they've watched kind of grow up into now a teenager, and so they can kind of gauge how long they've been down there, but really they don't know. And the bunker is guarded by men who walk around the outside and watch them and give them their meals. But apart from that, it's just like a big open space, like no privacy, one toilet like in the corner, but everything's open. And this is how they've been living. And they don't know why, and they don't know what the world looks like outside. And they're just kind of like resigned to this existence, because what the fuck can they do? And then one day this banging siren blares and the men just drop everything and run. And the youngest girl, who all the women are like, kind of feel like you weren't meant to be here to begin with, because why are we all old and you're the only kid? But anyways, she becomes the key to their escape. And then they're like, we don't know how to fucking exist. We don't know what's going on out here. Are we the only people left on Earth? And they have to like navigate this life. And this child, who all she's ever known is this underground bunker, is like trying to understand what life is and what life is like. And she has so many questions, and she asks the women all of these questions. And some of the women are like, what is even the point of explaining to you what sex is? God, it's like so philosophical. It's so deep. I mean, you talk about anti-intellectualism and BookTok not having any real literature or like smart, deep, meaningful literature. Get your hands on this novel, because oh my goodness, like the questions about just humanity that it raises from the perspective of a woman who has grown up knowing nothing but being in a bunker with other women guarded by men. I mean, I have to talk to you about A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers, which it is wild to remind myself right now that I only read this book at the start of this year. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is that the cover of this book in Australia and UK, I believe, is bad. It's not nice. It's not the worst thing, but when you compare it to the US cover, and when you compare it to the story and how incredibly dark and funny and deliberately pretentious this book is, the Australian cover just does not communicate what this book is like. It is just unlike anything I've read before. The writing style, Chelsea G. Summers's writing is, oh my God, I'm just like so in awe of it. So this is a story about a woman serial killer who is kind of writing her memoir from prison, and she's recounting her murders. And so she would like have these affairs with men and then kill them. But the thing is that she, as her job, like her career, she was like a really elite, well-renowned food critic. And so she's like a really good writer and really good at like describing sensory things. And she really, as a food critic, she's tried all sorts of foods. She's eaten all kinds of things. She's very open to trying all different cuts of meat, let's say. And so she's writing her memoir about her murders. She's a food critic. Do you catch my drift? Obviously, like, she's a psychopathic narcissist, as you would be if you're a serial killer. And she is such a snob. And the writing is so pretentious, but obviously that like this is a character who has been written, and so it's funny. It's like, oh my God, it's like such an entertaining protagonist or anti-protagonist to read. Cannibalism warnings, obviously, if you didn't pick up on that. But the Australian cover is just very disappointing, because I feel like you would look at that and get a completely different sense of what that book is. I have 2 more books to share with you that I have found on booktok that are really big on the circle that I exist in, the community that I am active in on booktok. Big Swiss. Again, it feels crazy to be spooking this book. Like, we've all heard of it. Everyone's read it. But maybe not. This is a booktok book, though. This is a literary fiction novel about a 40-something-year-old woman who has just ended her 10-year-long engagement and has moved in with an old friend who is like really loose, kind of hippie vibes. She's a drug dealer. She's living in this like 200-year-old house that is falling to bits and infested with bees. She's working as a transcriptionist for the local sex therapist, and she becomes obsessed with one of the clients, who she only knows like through the voice recording and the story she's telling of her traumas and her life. But then she bumps into her at the local dog park, and she's like, oh my God, I recognize that voice. I know who you are. And she's not allowed to know the clients' names when she's transcribing. And so all she knows about her is that she's tall and she is from Switzerland. And so in her mind, she's like Big Swiss. And then Big Swiss, when they bump into each other at the dog park, they like get to talking, and Big Swiss asks her to get a drink. And she's like, oh my God, I can't do this. I literally, like, I'm not allowed to socialize with the client. Like, I cannot do. Yes, okay, I would love to. And then a relationship between them starts, and it's like all this deception and all this like horny lust, and it's sapphic and it's depraved. I mean, this woman, like, it's just like so ethically wrong. And it just follows their relationship and the inevitable downfall of that, because what the fuck were either of them thinking? But it's very sexy and it's very weird and icky, but thoroughly entertaining. Finally, is a book that is very current, very new. Mind you, its wave on booktok has kind of come to an end, I think, at this point, but it had quite a big moment for a minute, but it wasn't super big like some of the rest of the books in this video have been. But I found it through booktok and went and sought it out and bought it for myself because I saw it on booktok. And it might just be my favorite book that I've read this year. It was wonderful. It is a debut Irish author. It's about, what's the word I'm trying to find? Interpersonal. Doesn't feel right now, but it's about human relationships. It's about sexuality and communication and miscommunication, most specifically relationships. And it follows a small ensemble cast on one hot day, I think in London, and they're all kind of connected, and they're going to a party that night where things are brewing, and then at the party they're gonna come out. It's really beautifully written. By the end of it, you end up really adoring all of the characters and really feeling for them, even though they are like fucking around or fucking each other over or like not really making great choices or whatever it may be. Like, you come to really understand them. One of the characters' mother has quite a big role in the story, and you just really feel for her by the end of it. I mean, I think I was crying over her. But yeah, it's true when people say that Irish authors are really having their moment. Something's happening over there. I don't know if they're all just like coming out of Trinity College, educated by some amazing professor or something. I don't know what it is that's going on in Ireland, but these authors are just really talented at exploring the human condition. If you have made it this far, I hope that this video has broken down your ideas of what booktok is and what a booktok book is, and maybe even just like rendered that term redundant. That's my hope. I think that I don't feel shame or anything around, like, I'm not like, oh, I don't read booktok books, like, ugh. I resent the context and the stigma that exists around the term booktok books, and I want to just eradicate that, right? Because for one thing, it's false. It's a false notion. Booktok books are not what the masses think booktok books are. Booktok books are any books that are talked about largely on booktok, and that is all sorts of genres, you know? So I really just like want to break down the idea, because it'll get like, I would say that I want to expand the idea of what a booktok book is, but that would just render it redundant anyway, because a booktok book is any book, you know? And I want people to know that. So thank you to this commenter who said that they like the books that I talk about and that I'm talking about something different. I'm glad that my video reached your algorithms. I'm glad that the algorithms are beginning to push book content that is slightly more diverse. I feel like I can't apply the word diverse to me, let's be fucking real. But I am glad that my video found you. Thank you for inspiring this video. I feel no ill feelings towards you for what you have said. I totally understand where you're coming from and what you mean, but it is something that I want to debunk and deconstruct. So thank you for getting this far, for watching this video. If you have, I bet there's like maybe 4 of you here right now. Hey, I love you. I will see you in my next video.